Hi, this is Chris, Chief Technology Officer of NamSource. I'm going to give you a quick walkthrough of our data transformation tool called Skwish. The purpose of Skwish is to provide simple, automated data processing. Data is everywhere, but it's rarely in a shape that fits your processes and visualization tools. Skwish takes data from diverse places and squishes it to fit your needs. You can use Skwish to transfer data from spreadsheets, comma-separated files, tab delimited text files, and so on, such that you can translate the format of the data regardless of what the columns are called or their data formats, and have that output to a destination format. That destination format might be better suited to a particular visualization tool. Okay, let's start to look at some examples. On screen right now is our favourite network visualization tool. It's called Kumu. Simply go to kumu.io and sign up for your free account, and you'll immediately be able to get to work visualizing connections between things. On screen we have a connection between people and stores. Our objective is to understand how individuals may influence the shopping decisions of others. So we've arrived at a state where Kumu is helping us visualize a network and the sentiment or relationships between things. For example, Jack dislikes super deals. Jack is best friends with Rod, and so on. So our network is a list of connections between people and stores. The types of connections are things like relationships or sentiment. Kumu has an awesome feature of being able to import data. Of course it can import things like Excel spreadsheets and comma-separated files, but it can also be linked with Google Sheets, which is just fantastic. Why it's so fantastic is because when it's connected to a Google Sheet, every time that Google Sheet is updated, the Kumu map is updated whenever we click refresh or load the map in our browser. So this particular network is visualized from this Google Sheet, which comes from my own personal Google Drive. The Google Sheet has two worksheets in it. The first is called Elements, the second is called Connections. This format is required by Kumu. The first worksheet of Element has two specifically named columns called Label and Type. A third optional column called Tags just enables us to apply tags to the elements that are listed in this sheet. The Type column tells us the type of the element. In this case we have a number of people and a number of stores. On this second worksheet we have the relationships between things. For example, two people, Jack and Rod, are best friends. Here we see that Jill has a relationship with Super Deals called ShopSat, as does Jane. Down here we find that Jack and the Super Deal store has a relationship, and we might refer to this as a sentiment. Jack dislikes Super Deals. So again, we look back at our network and we see our Google Sheet connected, providing the data that we need to visualize these connections. So how about we go ahead and put some new data in here, and then go back to Kumu and refresh. We'll now see our new awesome sports store listed. Okay, but there are no relationships in play. Let's go back to our spreadsheet and to our connection details. And this time we'll put our relationships in where Jane is known to manage this awesome sports store. Jill shops there, but Josh dislikes it. So now let's go back to Kumu and refresh once again. And we find our awesome sports shop here, and the relationships in play of Jane managing, Jill shopping there, and Josh disliking. So already I think you'll start to get a sense that with Kumu, being able to visualize the network between things is going to have awesome value for you. Furthermore, being able to link to a Google Sheet is going to let you work with rows and columns of data, which is a very friendly way to think about things, but then have Kumu visualize that data in a more meaningful way that will give you insights. So our objective was to find how individuals might influence the shopping decisions of others. We imagine that once upon a time we met a cohort of people. When we first met this group of people, we simply asked them for demographic information. Where do they live, their age, and some likes, which we've gathered as a list of tags. Sometime later, we found that during our research and these people meeting each other, they began to form relationships. Jack and Rod became best friends. Jack and Jill became a couple. And other people became friends, but we also learnt that Jack and Billy were father and son, and so on. So being organised as we are, like good researchers, we've kept our data in a single spreadsheet split between two worksheets. The first is our list of things, the second is our relationships between things. But then imagine a market research company contacted us and said, hey, do you know what your cohort's disposition is towards our list of stores? So they sent us a spreadsheet with this list of stores. We've got the names and we've got the type of the store. So we got busy, we met with our cohort again and we asked each of them, do you know of these stores? What's your relationship or disposition towards them? We found coincidentally that Rod actually manages super deals, and progressing further down the list that Jack dislikes super deals. Okay, if we think about this for a moment, we'll imagine or understand that there are two networks in play. The first network exists between our people, owing to the relationships which exist. The second network exists once again between our people and the places that were provided to us by the market research company. The relationships that exist could be described as either working relationships, shopping preferences, or dispositions towards stores. Unless we can visualize this network, it's quite difficult to understand how individuals might influence the shopping decisions of others. So Kumu has come to the fore to complete that visualization task for us, but only providing we can give it the data in its required format. Now, by starting with a blank Excel spreadsheet which Kumu gave us from an empty map, we took that spreadsheet and uploaded it to Google Drives. Once it was on Google Drives, we could get our spreadsheet open and take this ID and copy and paste it into Kumu. Kumu then realizes that from that link to that Google spreadsheet that it can get the data that it needs. So our only challenge remaining now is to painstakingly copy and paste this information and change these column names to the required names for Kumu, and to have two sets of data, one being the list of things and the second being the connections. But imagine how tedious a task that would be for these people, this second data source of stores, and then this list of relationships between people and stores. So this is why we created Skwish, to take these three distinct data sources, that were originally collected for a different purpose, and to merge them into a destination data source that can then be used for a further purpose, in this case to drive Kumu. Okay, this is a little bit technical, but is likely going to be a fairly easy thing to get your head around if you're familiar with data transformation or with Excel formulas and so on, or any kind of script-based language. It's reasonably well structured, it's not too technical, but it can get quite detailed. So let's just go step by step. So this data format that we're looking at on screen right now is called XML. It's called an extended markup language, and it's a way of just describing things in a fairly structured manner. So this line here just says, hey, I'm to do with Skwish. This line here then says, well, beneath me will be a collection of layouts, and sure enough, we see a number of layouts. This first layout says, what does a Kumu element look like? Next one says, what does a Kumu connection look like? So layouts are describing objects, and those objects comprise a number of columns. So if you think about a spreadsheet called Kumu element, we could imagine column A, B and C being called label, type and tags. So that's the purpose of a layout, is to describe some kind of data. And of course, when we're merging data, we'll need multiple types of layout. So here we're saying the Kumu element looks like this, label, type and tags, and a Kumu connection looks like this, from, to and type. This will effectively become our destination data format. In order to fill the destination data, we'll need some sources of data. So here we have our original list of people, our cohort, and we gathered name, town, age and likes when we interviewed them. Later we understood relationships, from, to and type. Coincidentally, that just happens to match the format of a Kumu connection. But that's not important. Next, we have a list of stores which was provided by our market research company. We have the name and the type of store. Next, we need some kind of layout that explains the relationships or disposition between people and stores. Again, it's a complete coincidence that the names of the columns match the Kumu element. They didn't need to, the Kumu connection. They didn't mean to, it just happens that they do. So here we might have the name of a person, to could be the name of a store, and type could be the disposition. So that's how we describe the layout of data. The next thing that we need is a way to explain to Skwish how should we convert data from one format to another. And this is often referred to as data mapping. So here we have a map with a name of Kumu element from people. Well, that gives us a clue what the map is intended to do. The input is people and the output is a Kumu element. And the mapping is achieved by taking a column map which says take the value from name and put it into the column called label. So the from column is from the input and the to column occurs in the output. So the name column of the people layout is sending data to the label column in the Kumu element layout. We also need to match a Kumu requirement, which is to say when we're creating elements, in this case we're creating Kumu elements with this map, that the element must have a type, and that type has a fixed value in this particular data transformation or map. So we copy a column from one place to another, we create a column of type which has a fixed value, and the next column tells us, well, we have some values in a column called likes which need to be moved to a column called tags. But here's another challenge for us. Let's go back to our list of people. And the format of the data in the likes column is a comma-separated list of values. Kumu actually needs these values to be separated by a vertical bar. So Skwish helps us by translating that list of likes, which is a comma-separated list, into a list of values which is separated by bars. Imagine that you had to copy and paste this information and painstakingly replace every comma with a vertical bar. That would be pretty boring. Let's go back to our script. So we now get the concept that a map explains how to move data from one format to another. So in this case we need to move to a format that outputs Kumu elements, and that was to do with people. We have a very similar map that explains how to move the data and create elements that are type of store. So look at this map here for people and look at this map here for stores, and you'll see functionally they're very similar. This moves the name of the store to the label, creates a fixed value of store for the element type, and moves the store type value to the tags column. The next thing that we need to do is transform the relationships, and remember there are relationships between people and there are relationships between people and stores. So these maps deal with Kumu connections. In this first map we're moving from an input type of relationship layout, which is the relationships between people, to output a Kumu connection. So the columns are similarly named, so we're just moving from an input column called from to an output column called from. And then finally we're moving from a column called type to an output column called type. Then we'll do exactly the same for the connections between people and stores, moving information from a source column to a destination column. So very briefly, that's what maps are intended to do, is move data from a source to a destination. Okay, where is the data? Well, we explained a moment ago that that actually lives on my personal Google Drive in this instance. In your case, it will live on your Google Drive. So here we have an input Google Sheet. We've given it a convenient name called People. There's a further spreadsheet with a convenient name called Stores. We also have a mention of something else which is going to explain relationships, and something else which is going to explain relationships between people and places or stores. Okay. For this Google Sheet, we need to explain what is the layout of the data. It's going to use that layout we looked at a moment ago called People Layout. Okay, with a Google Sheet, where is that Google Sheet? Well, it's easily referenced by actually taking the unique ID of the spreadsheet and placing it in the script. Let's go back, take a look at Kumu with its network and its connection to a Google Sheet. That unique ID is right here. All we've done is copied and pasted it into our script. So each of these spreadsheets has this unique ID, and you can see it changing. There isn't another spreadsheet that exists on the planet with the same ID. They're absolutely unique. So we have 3 inputs with their unique ID, and then we have a destination output Google Sheet, which we'll come to in a moment, which also has a unique ID. So we can see our script is essentially saying, go and find this Google Sheet, pull the data from it, and there's a worksheet there called People. Secondly, there's another Google Sheet with this unique ID which tells us that there's a list of stores. Now look here for a moment. This unique ID and this unique ID are the same, but the worksheet names are different. So we're saying to Skwish, go to this spreadsheet on two separate occasions. The first occasion, get the people worksheet data. The second occasion, go and get the connections data. So we would expect Skwish to come to this Google Sheet and look at these two different worksheets. Okay, so this is how we pull data from Google Sheets. We say, use a Google Sheet, give it a convenient name, use this particular data layout which explains what the columns are referred to as, the unique ID of the spreadsheet which easily enables us to go and grab the data out from the cloud there, and then tells us which worksheet within that Google Sheet that we need to get the data from. This next bit is very important. You'll often see in spreadsheets and comma-separated files that the first row of data is the column headers, and we don't want Skwish to load this data and mix it with our rows of data. That would be an incorrect interpretation of what this row is intended to do. So this skip headers command just says to Skwish, skip the first row, that's not data, that's our headers. So that's how we get input data. Okay, think a moment about those maps we talked about a moment ago in connection with the inputs. Ultimately, when we map the data from a source to a destination, we need some kind of destination to hold the data. So this is our stores. Let's look for a moment at the target format that we need. This Skwish Shoppers spreadsheet is the Kumu destination, if you like. It has the Elements worksheet and Connections worksheet. Our two stores match that. We have an Element Data store and a Connection Data store. Each of them has a specific layout. The first is Kumu Element, the second is Kumu Connection. Again, remember they refer back to the layouts we looked at some moments ago. So they're our stores, or you can also think of them as intermediate destinations for data. Whilst we're mapping data, we need some place for the data to rest once it's been loaded from our source systems. Next we come to the concept of transformations. This is basically the pipeline of moving data from a source to a destination. Here we see a transformation called people to elements. In other words, we're taking the data of people in our cohort and translating it to elements, which is the format that Kumu requires. Our source is people. If we look in our inputs, we'll see a source called people. Our output is element data. If we look at our stores, we'll see an output called element data. In our transformations then, it might look a little strange at first glance to say, well, there are two transformations loading into element data. But again, this is the power of Skwish. We have two sets of elements. In effect, we have people and we have stores. Kumu needs those people and stores merged into one list of elements. And we can see that Skwish has achieved this by merging our people and stores into a single worksheet. So these two lines of transformation achieved exactly that, taking our people and stores input data sources and merging them to one single output of element data. Exactly the same logic applies to relationships. We need the relationships between people to be sent to Kumu, and we need the relationships between people and stores to be sent to Kumu. So once again, if we look at our outputs of connection data, we find a store that's ready and willing to accept that data. Okay, so that's how we transform data from sources to destination formats. So if you like, we've had two buckets filled with information, elements in the Kumu format, connections in the Kumu format. Now we have to tell Skwish to send that data in that format to some kind of destination. Now look at this. Our inputs have Google Sheets, our outputs have Google Sheets. Our inputs have convenient names. Our outputs have a source. That source is a store. So this Google Sheet is going to pull data from the source store called element data. This second command of output Google Sheet is going to draw data from a source called connection data. And there we go, that's a second store. That data is going to be sent to the Google Sheet whose unique ID is this wonderful magic unique ID here. We're talking to the same Google Sheet on two separate occasions. First, to send our elements. Second, to send our connections. So, when we're talking to the same spreadsheet, we have to be clear about which worksheet this data is intended to go to. So let's look back at our destination sheet and see there are two worksheets with elements and connections, and both match the Kumu required format perfectly. The final detail is that we're telling Skwish to write the headers, and that's so Kumu can see we've indeed honoured the data format. There needs to be a label column, there needs to be a type column for elements. There needs to be a from, a to and a type in place for connections. Okay, so this was our very simple walkthrough of merging three distinct data sources that once upon a time were gathered for different purposes but merged in order to visualize data that might create some insights. In our case, how an individual might influence other shoppers. The journey to create Skwish began some time ago when a friend of ours asked us if we were able to take a complex spreadsheet which was loaded from Google Forms and described a complex social network. In this instance, we have a list of people with their websites, Twitter accounts, the kind of places they hang out, the kind of interests they have, other people that they're connected with, co-working spaces which they visit, and so on and so on. This particular spreadsheet has quite a large number of rows. Let's say 124 respondents have filled in information in the survey that feeds to this Google Sheet. But again, imagine how tedious it would be if, to meet Kumu's data format, we had to take this person's name, copy and paste this list of sectors, and then this column says all of the other people that this individual is connected to. We'd have to copy and paste each of these individual values and paste it as a separate row in the Kumu elements list. In other words, this person's name and every person in this column, all of these values, would have to be broken out into this list of Kumu elements, and that would be a very tedious job and quite likely prone to errors. The next thing would be is that people fill out the survey and new respondents create rows in this spreadsheet on an almost daily basis. That would mean you'd have to recognise which of these people had filled out the form who hadn't previously, and then again execute that tedious process of converting the data. Okay, so Skwish can literally save you hours every day in automatically merging the data and converting it into the right format simply at the click of a button. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to join the Skwish project as an early adopter or ultimately a user of the product, then please do send us an email at skwish.support@namsource.com. Thanks for your time. Please give us feedback on this presentation if you found it useful, and if you think there are any features that you would like to see in Skwish, then absolutely drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you. See you next time.